What that effectively means is if someone submits a planning application for that site, they kind of have the broad parameters of knowing what it is they can get development for. So that is huge. If you're looking at a site and you're doing your research, and you can look at all the videos I've done to help you research a site, but this is that level of kind of advanced step that very few people do. You can look at the site allocations, and if your site is allocated with something, you have a very, very good understanding or chance of knowing that if you want to get development on this site, you're going to get planning permission. That is a very, very important thing to know. And if you want to learn more about the planning process and how you can unlock value out of any property, click the link below to learn more. If you're looking for the next area to invest in, then look no further than the planning system. It might sound super boring and you might be wondering what I'm talking about, but honestly there are things within the planning system in the public domain that a lot of people have absolutely no idea about that are major influences on whether or not an area is worth investing in. The biggest developers in the country use them. They use consultants all the time to review these things that are going on to make sure that when they invest that they're going to get a really good chance of getting a return on their investment. This video is going to walk through the key things that you will probably know about and the key things that you probably won't know about. And it's those things that you won't know about that are probably going to be the most influential and determining factors on whether or not an area is worth investing in. So I'll start at the top, and it's probably the most obvious thing, and it's looking at planning policy. Policies are something that every council has. They're called local plans, or they're called local development framework. Every council website will have an adopted planning policies webpage that will let you know what are the current policies at that time. Now on that page, generally there are documents associated with that local plan that are still very important as to whether or not a local area is worth investing in. So normally in the planning policies, they'll have their overarching ideas of what they want to achieve in an area. So we want more housing, and we want more employment, and we want more green space, and we want more open space. But normally at the beginning of a local plan, they will list out a bunch of areas within that local authority's area that they are going to focus on. And normally in those areas they'll focus on how many houses they want, the level of employment floor space they want, and all the different types of, say, infrastructure they want to achieve through those development areas. So that's the kind of first starting step. You need to be very aware of that. So adopted planning policies. So these are the current adopted planning policies that will let you know what area the council is going to be investing in, or what area they want to attract investment in within their local authority. Now the key next step to this is looking at what are called supplementary planning documents, or sometimes they'll be called planning briefs or development frameworks. So what you want to do is find out what areas the local council is trying to encourage investment in, and then on the local planning policies webpage there's normally a link that says supporting documents or development frameworks, or SPDs is a kind of planning word for supplementary planning documents. And in there you'll find there's guidance on different types of things that the council wants to prioritise. Sometimes that's issues such as design or such as sustainability, but there are also documents trying to guide and encourage development in those areas that the local plan has identified. And in there they will say, yes, more detail on how many houses they want, but they'll actually set out the kind of development parcels, or they may even have kind of massing studies, so they may have 10 stories or whatever, and that will give you an idea in the bigger picture as to what areas that local council is going to invest in. And taking that a step further, so whilst councils try to promote areas and they'll have SPDs or area frameworks to try and encourage development, sometimes those things fall away. So if you think back to 2008 for instance, in particular, in 2006 the local council will have set out all these great development areas they want to invest in because there's such a great economic climate, but then 2008 happened and nothing happened. So you might find that even though there's areas within a local plan that they try to encourage, it never actually happened. So the step that you want to take to find out whether or not that's happened is you want to look for major planning applications associated with that area. Sometimes councils will actually have their own link on major applications that are going on, or they'll have entire web pages on progress of that development area to find out how things are progressing. And it's in there that you can find out that actually investment is committed in that area. So then you can make the assessment that, okay, investment's coming to this area. If I invest next door or in this surrounding areas, it's likely that the value of my site is going to go up as well. So those are the things that you can look at in terms of existing policy, existing supplementary planning documents or guidance for development in that area, and then looking for the actual planning application itself to find out, has the planning application gone in, has it been approved? So those are steps that you can take that very few people know about in terms of those different layers of things that you can research to find out whether or not a local area is going to be invested in. Now, I know what you're probably thinking is that some local councils have planning policies that are, some are like 20 years old or 10 years old, 15 years old or whatever, and those areas that they wanted development in have long since passed. The planning applications have gone in, they've been built. Okay, what's next? Well, the thing that you really want to keep an eye on that very few people look at is emerging planning policy. And believe it or not, you do actually get consulted on these. So people think that consultation only happens if a planning application comes in. So like a new house or a rear extension or a new office building, a local consultation will go out to get your views on it. And that's, a lot of people think that that's the only avenue to getting your views across on a development site. But in actual fact, when a local council needs to adopt new planning policies, so for instance, let's say they've got planning policies that are 20 years old, they will consult on a new set of planning policies. It's a very long process, but once the council have some idea of what it is they want to achieve, they'll then consult the local public, the local members of the public, to get their views on it. And within there are not only policies, often what accompanies them is what's called site allocations. Site allocation is such an important thing that so few people know about. So what site allocations is the local council saying, on this site, number X on X road, we think it's likely that there can be a development here of 10 homes or 100 homes or 1,000 homes or a new office building. And the key to that is, once that is adopted, so once the site allocations is adopted, that is planning policy. And what that effectively means is, if someone submits a planning application for that site, they kind of have the broad parameters of knowing what it is they can get development for. So that is huge. If you're looking at a site and you're doing your research, and you can look at all the videos I've done to help you research a site, but this is that level of kind of advanced step that very few people do. You can look at the site allocations, and if your site is allocated with something, you have a very, very good understanding or chance of knowing that if you want to get development on this site, you're going to get planning permission. That is a very, very important thing to know. So looking at those site allocations are really, really important, and will really help you find out whether or not you're going to get a good chance of that local area being invested in, the value of your site going up. Another example might be, so if a local council has just adopted some new planning policies, they've just adopted them maybe a year or two ago, but you're finding that there's no area frameworks or SPDs or whatever that have been adopted yet, you can find out what consultations are going on for those areas. Planning departments don't only consult on policies, but they'll also consult on these things called SPDs or area frameworks. They're less onerous on the council, but there is a public consultation element. So you want to always keep an eye on what the local council are sending out for consultation. It can be planning policies, it can be the site allocations, and it can be these kind of area framework. Those three things are really, really important together for finding out whether your local area is being invested in. So then you get an idea of, in the next 5, 10, 15 years, that the value of your area is going to go up because lots of investments going in. So there's another document that you can look at which will give you a good understanding as to whether or not the development for housing, particularly residential purposes, is going to get a good chance of getting approval. And it's called the SHLAA. It's the SHLAA, which stands for the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment. You don't need to know all that, but basically all the SHLAA does is tell you whether that local council is meeting their local council housing targets. So the national government sets housing targets for a borough, and then within their SHLAA, the SHLAA, it will set out how they are meeting those targets and how they're going to meet those targets. And that's really key. So if you're looking at a residential development and you want to know whether or not you can get housing on this site, if the council is showing that they are not meeting their housing target, then you can get a good understanding that actually they're going to be quite receptive to housing in this area. Now you have to meet obviously all the other policies that I've talked about in other videos, but from the basic standpoint of, is there an opportunity to get housing here, then you've got a good chance if the council is not meeting their housing targets, because if they don't meet their housing targets, the government places more and more pressure on them to deliver them, to the point where actually they will start stepping in and making decisions for the council in order to get enough housing in that local area. So the council really want to make sure that they get enough housing. But don't worry, I mean, if all of this sounds very complex, and to be honest, a lot of planning is just knowing where to look, and if you can't find all of this information, to be honest, even planning consultants and people in the planning industry can't find it. So don't worry about it. But the easiest thing that you can do is looking at planning decisions. So find a recently made decision and look for the council's officers report. The officers report will tell you what all the major issues are for that development. So try and find something that you're interested in doing. So let's say you want to do a development for 5 houses, say. Find a recent decision that has been made by the council for something similar, 5, 10, 15, whatever it is. And then have a look for the decision. Has it been granted, first of all? But also have a look for the officer's report. The officer's report will break down all of the issues that you need to know about, and key to that, it will touch on everything I've spoken about in this video. So it will tell you what the local planning policies are, what the site allocations are, how the council are doing in terms of their housing need. That's because a proposal for new housing is made within the context of, is the council meeting its targets? If it's not, the planning officer will clearly set out whether or not they're meeting it and how this development contributes to that. So that's the best way of doing this. Try and find an officer's report, and it will set out all the things you need to know, and then that will give you a good understanding as how to assess your own site. And it may sound complex and it may sound tricky, but like I said, find a officer's report that sets it all out for you, and it will do the job for you. Even though this might sound onerous and boring, it is a huge determining factor on whether or not a local area is being invested in and whether or not there are opportunities within that area to invest in. So take the time, do the research, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments below and I can help you find out what you need to do. But it's a really important step. Very few people do it, and if you do it, then you'll be way ahead of the game than anyone else, because as I say, no one knows about it. Everyone ignores the consultations that goes on about planning policies or site allocations, but now you know that actually those are the most determining bits of consultation as to whether or not your local area is being invested in and whether the value of that area is going to go up.